Welcome to another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics that write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, a serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs. And for the past year, I've been living in Hanoi, Vietnam, teaching entrepreneurship for Vinh University. Today, please welcome GoDaddy founder Bob Parsons, who's the author of Fire in the Hole, The Untold Story of My Traumatic Life and Explosive Success. And Bob, I have to say it is an explosive book because you've had the most amazing life. And I want to thank you for serving in the Marines.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure. I'm happy to do it. Serving was great. I'd do it again tomorrow. Coming home was the hard part.
And we're going to talk about that as well. The book is an amazing story that you could end up reading this book twice and not get all of it. So let's start off with, why did you write this book?
Well, I've had, as I recounted some of my experiences again and again and again over my life. I'm 73 years old. I've been asked and suggested to many times, you should put that in a book. And I decided to for a couple reasons, to demonstrate, first of all, how it is possible to come from absolutely nothing and to make a few $1 billion. So I mean, that's literally the story of this book, was how I did that and my early life. If you, as you read the book and you see about my early life, there's no hint of me ever being as successful as I, was fortunate to do so.
Yeah, I noticed you weren't the star athlete, you weren't the top of your class, any of those things. I'm a state school guy, so I'm very happy to see somebody like you who didn't go to an Ivy League school be such a huge success. Let me start with the interview backwards in a way, and then we'll go to what made you into the person you are today. Let's start with, how did you come up with the idea for GoDaddy? And looking at it now, can you believe you started this? Because I've been actually a GoDaddy customer almost since you started it, and I have 130 domain names there and 5 websites hosted. And I joined and stay with the company because the customer service is amazing. So tell us about that.
Well, the way that all happened was when I sold Parsons Technology. I had to take a couple of years off due to the non-compete, and which they defined as not working at all. And since I hadn't planned on doing that, when I left the company, I didn't have any issue with agreeing to that. But as time moved on, I realized I need to be in the fray of things. I need to have something on the line, and I need to be having my brain engaged in something challenging. So what I did was, I started a company, and I called it Joe Max Technologies in about 1997, I think it was. And I named it after an old dirt road. And what the idea is that I would hire some very sharp people. I knew the internet was coming like a freight train. We would try a number of things, and those things that didn't work, we would discontinue doing them, and with hopes that we would find something that would be something that would make the company. Now, as we did that, we did many things, but the only thing that we did where we were able to generate any revenue was building websites. But the problem with that is, if you're building them yourself, it doesn't scale. You need to well, there's a lot of work to make what at the time I thought was a small amount of money. So what we did was we wrote a program that would teach where people could build their own website, and then they'd pay us a small fee. And so after we did that, we released it, and it was kind of ahead of its time. We called it Website Complete, and it Well, it was hard to sell it. And the reason it was hard to sell it is because the noise from the dot-com boom was so loud. With a little company like us, we couldn't get through, especially with a forgettable name like Joe Max Technology. So we decided to change the name. And then at that same time, we were going to change the name, and we changed it to GoDaddy. And GoDaddy just fell out of the sky one night. Barbara, my right hand person, Barbara Rectorman, and I were working on trying to come up with a better name, and it took us 3 nights. And what happened was, on that third night, I suggested, how about Fat Daddy? And because you get kind of silly after a while when you do this, and then that was taken, and then Big Daddy, that was taken. And then I remember the old America Online deal where you had to type "go" in front of every command to make it work. So I said, how about GoDaddy? And it was
Yeah.
available. So I bought it, Mark, as a joke. And the next day we told the staff, we're going to call the company GoDaddy.com. And they all said, oh, that's the worst fucking name you could have picked. Right. But anyhow, the name stuck, and it turned out to be marvelous. It was exactly what we were looking for. Now, at the same time, we decided to become a domain name registrar, because all websites need, of course, a domain name. And we were trying to get domain names by maybe being a reseller for another company. And they were all terrible to deal with back then. I mean, their websites didn't, half of them
I remember.
didn't work. Their prices were crazy ass high, and on and on. And so what we decided to do is that we would fix all that. We would make it really easy to buy domain names from us, and we would sell them at a very reasonable price. And people would come to us to buy a domain name, and then we would take and sell them our software. Decision was right as rain, but the problem was we were still a small company, and weren't able to weren't able to get anybody's attention. And so what happened was, I would keep track of where I was in the business by how much money I had. So I started with 36 million, mostly because I got divorced. I had 72, but I lost 36. And my wife deserved every nickel of that and more. So anyhow, but I took my 36 and started GoDaddy, and I'd say, well, I won't worry about it till I get down to 30 million. And then, all right, 25, 20. And then it was 15, 12, 10, 8, 6. And when I got down to $6 million, I decided to shut the company down while I still had some money, because, I didn't even see a ray of light on the horizon, because, while everything we did was solid, we just couldn't get anybody to notice us, and couldn't buy advertising, because people were paying stupid prices for advertising. They were paying $300 a customer when a customer might be worth $2.50. I mean, stuff like that. All right. So anyhow, I go to Hawaii to decide how to shut the company down. I keep my own counsel. Well, always, I don't tell anybody what I'm going to do until I do it. And so I was there deciding severance, how I was going to pay creditors, liquidate assets, all that stuff. And I'm at this resort in Kona, Hawaii by myself. And I'm here trying to sort this out. And as time went on, I kept thinking, I don't want to do this. I just don't want to shut it down. And my epiphany happened when I went to get my car from the valet at one day, and the guy that was parking the cars comes up. He was my age, happy as could be, throwing the keys up in the air. How you doing, Mr. Parsons? Great day, isn't it? And I thought, what? This guy probably has nothing. He's parking cars. He's happy as a clam. I mean, his guy's about as happy as can be. I got $6 million and I'm miserable. What's wrong with this picture? So I decide then that I'll go back and strap myself to the mast with the company. And if the company goes down, I'll go down with it. All right. Well, I'd like to tell you that I did something different when I got back. I didn't. But what I did do was I just focused on what we were doing. And then something happened that made the company. It was a dot-com crash. And when the dot-com crash happened, we had people that we were doing business with. I mean, every week would be 2 or 3 of them. They just vanish. I mean, we'd send checks and they'd come back unopened. I mean, can't deliver it. I mean, it was that crazy. It was that much of a house of cards. So all the noise, that was there before disappeared. Now, what's more important is the advertisers that wouldn't talk to us before were lined up to pretty much give us their advertising. Why? Because we were one of the few companies that were paying their bills. And so, when that .com crash happened, I had more friends than I thought I had. And that's when GoDaddy was born. And then that October, we turned the corner because our advertising did resonate. And we were cash flow positive and never missed a month since. So that's pretty much the story how that happened.
I mean, what made you actually, I mean, you almost lost your entire fortune. How did you manage to like mentally get over that?
Well, I really never thought about it. You get right down to it. If I lost it, I thought, well, I'll park cars. I could be happy doing that. And besides, I'd have one hell of a story.
Yeah, and I think your background prepared you for this, right? I mean, your father had gone bankrupt in his business. It
Yeah.
was like a corner store. So you had I had the same thing. My father went bankrupt to do, and I always think, well, what's the worst thing? As long as nobody dies, it's no big deal. And so, what was your mental mindset to get you through this?
Well, my mindset is what I learned in during the Vietnam War is when I first got to my rifle squad, they were on a hill 190 in Quang Nam, Vietnam, rice paddies as far as you can see. And then the other view from the hill was the coastline. Beautiful. Just I mean, the colors were striking. Well, you're in Vietnam. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I love Vietnam, and
Yeah.
Vietnam loves Americans.
Yeah. So anyhow, I'm on top of this hill, and I meet the guys in my squad, and they tell me, they said, well, we were ambushed for like 5, 6 days ago. 4 of us were killed. One of us was seriously wounded, and to a man, it was all the senior guys. So the guy that was senior then his name was Barry. He'd been with the company 6. When I say the company, Delta Company, for 6 weeks. And I mean, that's the seniority that he had. And he was the senior guy. He was the squad leader guy calling the shots. And I mean, in the Marine Corps tour, 13 months. So I took and went and sat on I had some time before we were going out on our first night's ambush. Um, I went and sat on this wall, this old French wall that was surrounding the top of the hill, and I was looking out over the valley, and I didn't see any of it. I was worried about how in the hell am I going to live through this? I first of all, it's the tour's 13 months. Everybody that's been here, is left in either on a stretcher or in a bag, and it's just it looked like the situation was hopeless. The guys in my squad, really haven't been here much longer than I'm going to be. Nobody really knows much. So as I looked out, I think I came as close to a panic attack as I've ever had. And then
Wow.
and then I got the thought. What the thought was, I'm going to die here. I mean, it's not how I'm going to get through this. The fact is I'm going to die here. So what I decided, and it took about 5 minutes, And after I truly accepted that, all the stress came off of me. And then I was a different guy. So I made myself two promises. The first promise was I would do whatever I could to do my job as a U.S. Marine and not let any of the guys I served with down, or so my parents could be proud of me. That was the first thing. And the second thing was I would do whatever I could to be alive for mail call the next morning. And I never looked past the next morning's mail call. And sometimes I'd get mail, sometimes I wouldn't. When I wouldn't get mail, I'd read the other guy's mail. They didn't get mail, they'd read my mail. That's the way you're that close. So that's kind of the way it went. That first night we went out on ambush. I see my first combat. I wasn't with these guys 4 hours. One of the guys with us got hurt so horrifically, it's hard to even describe it. He went to throw a hand grenade came in and landed next to him. He picked it up. It didn't go off, went to throw it back, and it went off when it was right here. And it blew his arm off, blew the side of his head off. His intestines were out, blew part of his leg off. But he wasn't dead. And so that happened that night. And then he got medevac. I saved the guy's life that night. Shot a snake that night. That's my big confirmed kill for that night. And then that was then. Next night, our point man hit a trap walking on a rice paddy dike, blew his legs to shreds. I helped carry him about a mile back to the a medevac point. And so that's when next night, we sprung an ambush, killed 2 NVA. And that's the way it went. And I lasted a month, and then I hit a trap walking through a village at night. And took shrapnel on both legs, left elbow, and I was medevaced out all the way to Japan, to the Naval Hospital.
Well, I thank you so much for your service. And certainly, I've had ex-military here, and you guys grew up very quick in these kinds of circumstances. And so I think it makes all the difference, and you learn how to handle stress. But I have to say that I coached Navy SEALs about how to become entrepreneurs, and they would ask me, how do you handle the stress of being an entrepreneur, having to make payroll and all those? They felt it was more stressful being an entrepreneur than it was serving in the SEALs.
Well, it's funny. We think just the opposite.
So we have some questions from the audience, and then we'll jump back to my questions. One of the questions is the registration for a domain name something the government requires?
Well, actually, it is like a quasi-governmental organization, maybe like an NGO. It's called the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. And what they do is that it's a nonprofit organization, and they manage the zone file of certain domain names. And certainly all the major ones like .org, .com, .net, those things. And so yeah, it would be. I guess the answer to that is yes.
Another question from the audience: how many years did it take to spend that money down?
To spend what money down?
The original money that you put in. You'd gotten money from Parsons Technology, and then you had 36 million after the divorce, and then you essentially invested it all almost in GoDaddy. How many years did it take to spend that money down to where you were down to like $6 million?
7. So I was never asked that question. I would say 5 or 4.
5 years. And you didn't take any venture capital?
No, and never a partner. And I had opportunity. I had people wanted to invest in it, and I just wouldn't do it. And the reason is Mark, I'm pretty eccentric about the way I manage my businesses. So I don't think anybody who is a normal individual would be willing to put their seatbelt on and go along for the ride.
You mean with you in particular, or just as an entrepreneur in general?
Well, maybe in general, but particularly with me.
You wrote that no matter how certain things get, I always feel good about the outcome. How did you develop that mindset, and what impact has that had on your success?
Well, it's had big impact on my success. You notice if you obviously read the book. I don't blame anybody for anything. As things go, the only person I ever hold accountable is myself. And so whenever the outcome, whatever it is, to get all you know tied up over it, it serves no purpose, absolutely no purpose. The only thing you need to be concerned about is what you're going to do tomorrow and today. That's the only thing that's going to make a difference. So as a result of that, what I try to do is whatever happens, when it is, certainly when it is negative, I try to learn from it and use it as an opportunity to be better the next day. And how did I learn from that? I guess that all started from the way I grew up. You remember how I passed the fifth grade, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually failed the fifth grade, and for the people that are dialed in, I failed the fifth grade, but instead of none, that it was three of us that failed. None took the rest of the class out, and I did not wait for her to come back. I took off, and the other two waited, and I spent all summer with my parents thinking I passed. I mean, my father asked me, when I got to where the parents were waiting, he goes, "Where's your report card?" Now, keep in mind, he's there standing there with my little brother's report card, and I
Uh-huh.
said, "Sister didn't give me one." Well, she
Yeah, I
had.
remember seeing the book.
She didn't give report cards to the guys that failed, right?
Yeah.
And so he says, "Really?" And then I told him a fib. I said, "Well, Dad, this year, if you pass, you didn't get a report card." And he goes, he looked at me like a dog that heard a strange noise. And then he said, he's standing there, he's got a racing form under his arm, he's got a Territon in his mouth. He flicks the Territon and says, "All right, get in the car." That's how that went. I got home to my mother. My mother says, "Where's your report card?" I went through the same thing, and I said, "Mom," I said, she says, when I told her, "If you didn't get a report card if you passed," she goes, "I never heard of such a thing in my life." I said, "Mom, call sister, she'll tell you." And she goes, "Well, I'm going to call our sister." I said, "Well, you should if you feel that way." Well, I knew she never would, and she never did. But what surprised me is the school never called. So and the school never called all summer. I spent all summer like with the weight of the world on my chest, waiting to see what was going to happen on the first day of school when, my parents found out that I really failed and I lied to them. I knew I was going to be executed. I just didn't know how, if I would be shot, hung, what. So I go to school that last day, at first day of school, and my two buddies that failed are back in the fifth grade line with Sister Brenda, and they're waving to me to come over, and I'm like, when shushing them away.
Yeah.
So the lines fall in, the second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, and then the sixth grade. I got in the sixth grade line. That teacher, Sister St. Thomas, she pulls me out of line and puts me on the side, and she says, "Sister Brenda told me what you did. She said you didn't wait for her to come back, so she could fail you. So she didn't know what to do, so she passed you."
Wow.
And I said, "Whoa!" And I mean, they were the happiest words I ever heard in my life. So she said to me, she goes, "You give me any trouble, you're going right back to the fifth grade." I said, "I won't, sister." And I didn't. I mean, I wish I could tell you I was a better student. I may be just a marginally better student, but I can remember when I had my report card for the sixth grade, my mother looking at it and saying, She goes, well, this is nothing to be proud of. He says, but you did pass. And she said, I like it when you get a report card. And I said, so do I, Mom. So do I. And then I didn't tell my mother about this, didn't tell her at all until I came back from the Vietnam War. And then she kind of rode me the ride. She said, that is such a sin. What you did was wrong. You on and on and on. So when I made the Forbes list, I called her and said, Mom, I'm on a Forbes list. She goes, what's that? And I said, it's a list of 400 richest people in America. And she goes, oh, that's nice. And I said, Mom, I know guys that passed the 5th grade that are not on that list. And you know what she said to me? She said, that doesn't make it right.
Ah, still held you accountable.
Yeah. So I think, still, I might have to go back to St. Elizabeth and repeat the 5th grade.
And is that school still around? Because so many of the archdiocese schools, it's closed.
Still there. I think it's a little more easygoing than when I was there.
We have a question from the audience. How much of your success would you attribute to luck, hard work, perseverance, grit, and risk-taking ability?
Well, if you put all those things together, all of it, a large portion to success, I think, is luck. But where the big difference between just blind luck and luck that you're going to take advantage of is having the perseverance to hang in there and the ability to spot the luck when it arrives. I mean, those are the differences. I think a large part of luck has been success for me, has been luck. I believe in angels, and I'd like to think that I have a guardian angel that kind of looks out over me. I think my guardian angel's about exhausted right now, but uh, whoever, whatever it is, I'm
But
glad there.
but as you mentioned, look, if the market had not crashed for the .com, we might not be talking right now.
Well, unless you needed me to get your car.
So I was just thinking you would have been the best at parking people's cars. You would have come up with another new idea and somehow made that work. Another question from the audience. What skills are required today to become successful in the new world of AI?
Well, first there's, you need to have the technical abilities to deal with that. But you've always needed the technical abilities, regardless of whatever it is to deal with. But you need the same thing, you need to think, you need to see yourself always as succeeding. You need to always dream that you're going to succeed. And you need to hang in there. You need to love what you're doing. You need to be doing it for the right reason. Now, doing it for the right reason, what I'd like to say about that is, if you're just saying, I want to make a lot of money, I'm going to start an AI business. I don't think you stand a shot. But if you say, I want to, start an AI business, what happens, and you're doing it for the right reasons, you're doing it because you really want to make a difference, and you want to just maybe just to excite your employees, and you have something special for the whoever's going to be your customers, then I think there's a good chance you're going to make it. But that's what you need. It's the way you think, and the reasons you have for being involved in it, and then of course the technical skills.
That's the same advice I give my students. I said, you can't survive as an entrepreneur, because I've done 28 ventures myself. If you aren't looking to change the world in some way, you just won't. If it's just about money, you won't stick with it. You have to have something, be on a mission.
You won't work as hard as you would if you were doing it for love. And for you love what you're doing. And my father has told me something once that I thought was just beautiful. He said to me that when you love something, it tells you all its secrets.
That's an interesting way of putting it.
Yeah.
Another question from the audience, but I think you've answered this already, which is, what would you say is the number one piece of advice for a budding entrepreneur?
Number one piece of advice. Well, first put your seatbelt on. This is the second. And the other just general piece of advice is, if you love what you're doing, you're there. So I'd say it's very important to love what you're doing.
Another question from the audience. Love your work with PTSD for veterans and your story around getting some healing. What more needs to be done to help veterans with more holistic PSTD treatment options?
Well, the most important thing that needs to be done is the FDA needs to approve MDMA, and then eventually psilocybin, and those two would be a huge difference in providing effective treatment for veterans PTSD. Because while we have a number of things that mitigate the symptoms for a while, the psychedelics administered by a skilled therapist or guide, because with psychedelics, the therapy does the healing, Mark. Psychedelics make it possible, but that needs to be done so they have the tools to treat veterans, and then we need the ability to reach and get the veterans to use it, because once the veteran decides there's no help for him or her, to reach them, it's going to be very difficult.
Another question from the audience. What's your most recent accomplishment and circumstance that you're proud to admit that tracks to your rule? When you're ready to quit, you're closer than you think?
Well, I would think for sure, GoDaddy, and for sure Parsons Technology before that. When I went ahead and did that ad that made the difference in Parsons Technology, I was broke. I mean, I didn't have much money, and I had they made me a hell of an opportunity on an ad. This was this company out of Fort Dodge. They did this computer rag which had all these deals in it. But the thing I liked about it is they had this huge mail list, and on the outside front cover of this magazine they always did an ad, and they offered me that ad. They'd say it's normally like 15-20,000. We'll sell it to you for 5,000 if you can get me creative in a week. Well, I did. The ad, I was selling my software, I think, for $35 or $29 before that. The ads dropped it down to $12, and the ad said money counts, but it only costs $12. And and I made all the radical changes. The one change I made was, back then a lot of computer software was copy protected. I said it's not copy protected. They had this, you can only read it like a book. I said, if you want, copy it and give it to your friends. And then I said, you do anything you want to do with this, just send me $12. And when that ad dropped, eventually, you see these pictures of a mailbox just stuffed with envelopes.
Yeah.
That's how mine was. Only they all wouldn't fit in the mailbox, and I had a big mailbox. So that's when I learned how to sell. The company pivoted from that point, and we're profitable from that day on.
How do you handle worry? As many of my students are high performers with great expectations of themselves and from their family and friends.
Well, the worry is stressing over what you think might happen, and then going over it again and again and again. The things I learned to do about worry is first quantify what you're worried about. What's the worst thing that can happen? What are you worried about? And then accept the fact that it's going to happen. And once you do that, then start working a day at a time while you're waiting for it to happen, and try to prove it. And what you improve upon, what you think is going to be, and what you'll find is the vast majority of the time, what you're worried about is never going to happen to the degree that you're worried about it. And so all that time you spend worrying is, well, it makes you unhappy, makes you unhealthy, and certainly gets in the way of your success.
You wrote you were a dreamer. How much of your success do you attribute to you being a dreamer?
All of it, all of it. Yeah. I mean, I started when I was a little boy. I mean, just always pictured myself in a better situation. I mean, I grew up tough, Mark, and was spent most of my early years in the basement of my house by myself. And and I used to think, if when I grow up, if I have a family, they're always going to have what they need, always. And I dropped to my knees when I was about 8 years old, and things were going nuts upstairs with mom because she didn't have any money. Creditors are hounding, and whatever they get, they gamble away. Holy shit! So I dropped to my knees and promised the Lord, good Lord, that that promise, if I ever had a family, they would always have what they needed. I never asked God for anything. I just made a promise, and I've never broke that promise.
You wrote that your father wasn't good in business and was a gambler, and yet being an entrepreneur, some would say, is a type of gambling. What did you learn from your father, and how did that affect the way you looked at business?
Well, businesses, yeah, I've heard people say, well, isn't being an entrepreneur gambling? Well, it may be in a sense where it's more risk taking, but the difference between gambling and being an entrepreneur, especially if you're thinking right and you're really done your homework, and you're doing it for the right reasons, is being an entrepreneur in that regard. The odds are in your favor, as opposed to, let's say, betting on a horse at a racetrack or going to a casino or betting numbers and all those things. Odds are never sharply not in your favor. So yeah, I would take exception to that.
Did comic books have an impact on why you ended up in technology instead of accounting? And what was your favorite character and why?
Well, comic books to me really didn't have anything to do with me being in technology. What they had to do with is for me to get through what I was dealing with upstairs, and passing time in the basement and coming through that with some degree of sanity and being able to read and spell. I learned all that from reading comic books. So what was my favorite character? I always like the happy stuff. I never read anything sad. I read Casper and Hot Stuff and Spooky and Archie and the gang, and all that, because I mean it's just lifted your spirits, and I loved it.
Your first business, like almost every kid in America, right, was a lemonade stand. And what did you learn from that experience, and how did that affect your interest in business?
Well, the thing I learned mostly from the lemonade stand is when you make it, you use lemon juice, not vinegar. All right. What I did was when I did my one and only lemonade stand, I decided there was nobody home that day, so I decided to start selling lemonade. And my mother had this big lemon juice bottle, and in it she kept vinegar. It didn't have lemon juice. Now I had no way of knowing this, so I made this thing that was
Oh,
like, yeah, and I tasted it, and it just tasted terrible. Oh Jesus!
uh,
But I kept putting more sugar in, and I never really had lemonade, so I thought maybe this is how it tastes. So I put it outside, and
and people bought it.
that was back when insurance men walked debit routes, collecting weekly life insurance premiums from the customers. And the guy walking ours, his name was Mr. Hill. You know, he had his sport coat strung over his back. He had his tie down. I mean, and he's walking through these row houses in East Baltimore, and he comes next to me. He goes, he goes, man, I'd really need one of these. So he gives me a dime. I'm selling them for a nickel. He says, keep it. So he takes this thing, knocks, he knocks the whole cup back. I remember his eyes bulging, and then he spits it out across the street, and, you know, into the street. And he goes, "Kid, that's the worst fuck. That's the worst fucking lemonade I've ever tasted." and ever, you know, and I sold a few others. I had to give them all their money back, and then word got out, and my lemonade stand was a sheer failure.
Well, now you learned about the quality of product and getting it right?
Oh, for damn sure.
Do you think you would have been an entrepreneur if your family was solidly middle class?
Mark, I have no way of knowing that. I have no way of knowing it. You know, I know things would have been very different for me. And if I did it, you know, be a different way. Now, one thing I'll tell you about the way I grew up, one little vignette of a story will tell you. I had to teach myself how to tie my shoes. I had nobody to teach me. So I figured out a way. Eventually, took me months to get two bows, and it is and if people watch me tie my shoes, they'll go, "Holy shit! Who showed you how to do it that way?" But it works and it's quick. So anyhow, you know, if I was in a solid middle class family with somebody teaching me that stuff, yeah, I'd have been a very different guy.
Yeah, I wondered if that was the case. A question from the audience. Any plans for a movie version of Fire in the Hole?
Well, you know, I've had my PR firm, which does a lot of work in Beverly Hills and Hollywood, friends and all, and you know the people that she's been talking to about it said that you know it's altogether possible.
I have a friend that I could introduce you to if you're interested in that. Please talk about why you decided to join the Marines. And again, thank you for your service to your country.
Well, I was 17 years old. This was in March of my senior year, and it was gym. I was at gym class. It just ended. I was getting changed back into my normal clothes. And I had two buddies come over to the locker, Charlie Mason and Aggie Sorokas. And they both said, "We're going to go down and talk to the Marine Corps recruiter at after school today. Would you like to go with us?" I said, "Absolutely." So I went down and talked to the Marine Corps recruiter with them, and he had us at hello. So all three of us enlisted. My mother had to sign for me. They were already 18, and so you know that's how that happened. There wasn't a lot of thought went into it, but the reason I joined was, brother, I needed a change, and I was ready to get off and into the adventure. And the Marines, man, that sounded pretty good to me.
What was the hardest part of Marine training, and how did that shape you as an adult?
Well, you know, Marine Corps training is especially boot camp is man, no walk in the park. I'll tell you that. And it is pretty tough from the moment you set foot there to the moment that you leave. And what I was perfect for them because I was used to a very solitary life, just you know, living in the basement and um, you know what it did was it just taught me all the different skills that you needed to be a combat marine. I mean, not all of them, but a lot of them. You know, and you know, they taught me endurance. They taught me the importance of responsibility. You know, they taught me that discipline that went, everybody's counting on me to do the right thing. And the way they would do that in boot camp, if you made a mistake and you were called to and you were called for it, and they'd be, instead of punishing you, the guy that made the mistake would never get punished. They would punish everybody else. And they would make the guy that made the mistake stand on a foot locker while everybody's like doing this really hard calisthenic around them. And of course, they'd all be looking at you going, I'm going to fucking kill you. So, and you double down and really try and not do that again.
How did you fall in love with computers?
Well, when I came back from Vietnam, I was a different guy. I had some pretty solid PTSD, and I didn't like being around people all that much, because I found that whenever I did, I just wasn't like them anymore. I was so different. I had a lot of thoughts in the back of my mind from the war. None of them had any experience like that, and or rarely, I should say. And that's then I had a flash temper. I was I was depressed a lot. And when I got into computers, that was something that I could just focus directly on, and it just took me out of myself. And we met each other at just the right time, me and computers.
What made you start Parsons Technology? And please tell us about the business, which didn't get off to a great start, but over time, as you were mentioning about the ads and the publication, that you ran that ad and that was successful, but over time had great success. And what did you learn from that experience?
Well, I learned, the one big thing I learned is small ads don't work. Small ads says small company, but if you have a big ad, it says you're pretty solid and what you have is pretty real. And that's the big thing I learned from Parsons Technology, because I never was able to sell much running very small ads, but the moment I ran a big ad and I had a product to back it up, that's when the company turned the corner. Um, so that's pretty much it.
How did you develop and set your big, hairy, audacious goals, a term coined by Jim Collins? I hadn't heard that term in quite some time.
Yeah, well, the way I did the goals was just by being involved in the business day in and day out, and looking at what we needed to do to to get to where we needed to go. And sometimes to do that, it was a pretty significant goal. Now, I never even knew the staff was calling them big, hairy, audacious goals until I put the book together. And I started talking with Mark Hartung, who was part of that group. But I did know that I did give them a pretty big task, and most of the time they'd get it done.
What was your management style?
My management style is very involved, but mostly hands off when it comes to decision making. What I do is that, I'm in charge of the macro, direction, and the micro. Sometimes I get involved in that if there's a management issue with whatever particular area of business. I'm looking into at the time. But what I like to do is I like to focus on making what I'm involved with, well, a good place to work. And the staff is happy, the staff is enthusiastic, because when the staff is enthusiastic, what do we know about enthusiasm, Mark? It's contagious, right?
Yeah,
And so when the
right.
staff's enthusiastic, the customers become enthusiastic. And when they become enthusiastic, they get other customers to come to you.
You always noticing in great businesses, people are smiling, they're happy, they like being there. They can't wait to get in the morning. They stay longer. They spend a lot of time with their colleagues going out for dinner or whatever it is. Makes a huge difference, right?
Absolutely, it does. Yeah.
Uh,
So, I mean, a happy staff is a productive staff.
Question from the audience. I'm happy owner of a set of Gen 4PXGs. I love the fact that you cut out the middle man, making all the profits in golf, passing those saving on to the customers so they could have your tour level clubs for a common man's salary. What? Why did you do that? And BTW, congrats on Jake winning the Mexico Open.
There you go. Well, thank you. And yeah, it was nice seeing Jake do that. He sure shined. Um, but the reason that we went direct is because we entered an established business. We were told by somebody that I had done part of the GoDaddy deal with KKR that uh, that the golf business is tough. Said it's an established business and very difficult to succeed in it. Well, what I knew was if I was going to succeed in it, I had to be different than everybody else. When you the Marine Corps taught me that when you're in combat, you never run right into the machine gun because that's a good way to become a non-factor in the in the combat. So so it's the same thing. I mean, all the companies that we compete with are very entrenched companies. They've been doing it for years and years and years, and they know how to do business the way they're doing it. So if you try to do business the same way that they're doing it, you're going to get clobbered. So we entered it, and we do business very differently.
What was the biggest mistake you made in your first company and what did you learn from it?
The biggest mistake I made in my first company, Parsons Technology, it had to be trying to get by with small ads. Now, the one thing I'm going to tell you about being an entrepreneur, I mean, there's really nothing to prepare you for it. You're walking in, you're going to learn by taking it in the teeth, and the importance is to look at every lesson, the thing that doesn't work, as as a learning experience, and to treat bad news as more important than good news. I mean, the good news, I don't need to know it. The bad news, I need to know it immediately so I can do something about it. I often phrase, being an entrepreneur is like going to jail for the first time. I mean, you're going to learn a lot of lessons. And I think the best thing I can say is, and I know I'm not directly answering this question because I don't the only big mistake I made with Parsons is using small ads instead of very big ads. But I fixed that when I had the final opportunity. But when you are running, you're running a business. I like to always have, for me, a fallback. Now, I didn't with GoDaddy have a fallback, but I did with Parsons Technology because I didn't quit my full-time job until I felt that for sure that it was going to work, and I was past the small ads and all that. And the first year after I quit my full-time job, I made $250,000. Well, I never made $250,000 in my whole life. And the reason I was able to do that is because I walked in very slowly and I had a backup plan. So, there's another saying I always use, you don't run into jail. You walk in very slowly.
Adam Grant from the Wharton School I taught wrote a book and said that he encourages entrepreneurs to be doing 2, 3 different business simultaneously so that they don't put all their eggs in one basket. Now studies have shown that it's smarter for entrepreneurs to have multiple businesses than focus on one.
Well, I hear that. I have multiple businesses now. And what these multiple businesses do is, they again provide a fallback to help you get through your primary business.
A question from the audience. In the age of social media advertising, what would be the equivalent of big ads when most platforms only allow small format ads?
I don't know the answer to that. You're going to have to do your research and find out. But I don't know.
You grew Parsons to over 1,000 people, which is an enormous accomplishment. What was the hardest part of scaling up, and what type of people did you look to surround yourself with?
Okay, well, what I do is somebody has a master's degree. That doesn't mean too much to me. The basic bachelor degree. I don't care what they studied. It just shows that they can accomplish getting the degree. So that means a little bit to me. So I treat an AA 2-year degree the same as a 4-year degree, even though I know for those of you that have 4-year degrees, I compliment you and, well done. But mostly I look for somebody who is very enthusiastic, knows about what my business is dealing with. And I like to call it a light in their eyes. I mean, they want to make a difference and they want to dig in and they want to go. And, that's the type of person I want to have on my side. I like to call it go to war with. And I'll take that over somebody with a master's degree and a doctorate any day of the week.
So here's my last question to you. What is your piece of advice for aspiring entrepreneurs in the age of AI and global competition?
Well, my advice is the same as if you ask me when, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, is that first of all, be sure you're doing whatever you're doing for the right reason, to make a difference. Have a fallback if you can, and walk in slow, go slow.
Bob, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. It's 2 a.m. here in Hanoi, so I can tell you that you were worth staying up for. And as somebody wrote here, you're a humble, genuine, authentic guy, and we need more people like you. So I'm glad to have spent the time with you, and we all have. And we wish you great future luck, and especially this book. I'm hoping many people will be reading it.
All right. Thank you, Mark. And I'm jealous of you being in Vietnam. You
Well,
know,
you come by Vietnam, I will definitely host you for a great meal here.
oh, I'm sure you will. And I was in Vietnam in 2017, and I went back to Da Nang to host a golf conference or the keynote one. And I'll tell you what, I didn't know how I'd feel. Man, it felt like I was home again. Just loved it.
Yeah, John McCain and John Kerry are huge heroes here in Vietnam. They have statues of them, everything. It's amazing. I mean, they've really see things in a totally different light here, and they really welcome Americans. If you go to history museums here, we don't get beaten over the head for the war whatsoever. So I think it's great. And I thank you again for your service and look forward to staying in touch and following your
All right,
story.
all right, brother. Thank you so much. Been a pleasure, John, Mark.
My pleasure as well. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next week.